May it please the court. Members of the jury, this case is about a lot of numbers, and those numbers don't tell the full story. Before we go on, I'm going to ask you to think about a simple childhood exercise that many of you may have either done or seen your children do. I want you to think of a paint-by-numbers picture. It's a picture with shapes in it that has numbers in each of those shapes, and those numbers correlate to a color. As you fill in the colors next to the numbers and over the numbers and shade in the areas, you begin to see a picture. Once you finish, you're left with a beautiful picture. But if you leave some of those numbers blank, if you fill in just a few of those spaces, you're left with less than a beautiful picture. You won't be able to see the full picture with just a few numbers. Just a few numbers won't tell you the full story. Members of the jury, my name is Ben Hepner, and I, alongside my co-counsel, Miss Amanda Stearns, intend to give you the full story, intend to fill in all of those areas regarding Reese Lansing and Allendale Charity Hospital. Today we will provide you with all the information and all the numbers that you will need in order to see the full picture. Now let's talk about what brought us into court today. It's a decision that Mr. Reese Lansing made, a decision that saved a life, and a decision where no actual harm was committed. Reese made the decision to donate one of his kidneys to someone that he cared for very deeply. It's Taylor Warren, someone whose life depended upon that kidney, whose health was deteriorating, and who desperately needed help. Reese Lansing was there, and he made a decision to save a life where no actual harm was committed. Now you should know that the hospital has already accepted fault for their actions. They have accepted fault for operating on a young man who was less than 18 years old without improper consent. But the ultimate reason that we're here today is to award what, if any, damages to Reese's parents. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you should know that just because liability has been established does not mean you have to award any damages at all. Just because the hospital has already accepted that liability does not mean that you're required to give Mr. and Mrs. Lansing any money. Now, as we go on today, you're going to hear about two different kinds of damages. The first, actual damages. Now, those damages are those that are to be considered for lost wages, medical bills, future medical treatments, things like that. When you consider those damages, you're only to consider those that are reasonably likely to occur. You'll see that on the jury form. When you think about those damages, you should also consider the evidence that you're going to hear, that I'm going to talk about in just a minute, that there is no certainty that Reese will ever suffer from polycystic kidney disease. Now, as I mentioned, there's another form of damages, exemplary damages, commonly called punitive damages, and those are meant to punish wrongful conduct, but conduct that is done so purposefully, so willfully, so intentionally, and is so egregious that it deserves to be punished. Remember, those damages are to punish. But you should also know that those damages are completely and entirely separate from actual damages. Just because you decide to award actual damages does not mean that you have to award exemplary damages. When you consider, if you consider awarding exemplary damages, you should consider the evidence that you're going to hear about how the hospital acted. You're going to hear from Reese himself that he left those forms at the hospital blank, that all he put was college student. The hospital thought they were dealing with an 18-year-old college student. They relied on the forms and the information that the patient gave them. They had no reason to believe that he lied to them. They acted the same way that hospitals act every day, relying on the information that their patients give to them, the good faith belief that they have no reason to lie to a healthcare provider. Now, the picture the plaintiff wants to draw for you is slightly different. Reese is a young man, a young child, incapable of making decisions for himself, thinking on his feet, thinking rationally. You're going to hear from one of Reese's parents that they feel this way. They're the same parents who let him go off to college at 13, same parents who let him live alone in a dorm at 13 and continue to let him live there. the same parents who provide little, if any, financial support, and the same parents that heard from Reese himself that he wanted to donate a kidney, didn't stop him, waited until the actions that Reese wanted to take occurred, and then decided to file this lawsuit. You're also going to hear from Reese himself. You're going to see a young man who at 16 is set to graduate from college, a young man who has a 3.96 GPA average, and a young man who's already been accepted into medical school at Stanford University. What you're going to learn from Reese is that he's familiar with the medical procedures that he had based on his background in undergrad. And you're going to hear from Reese that he wasn't honest and accurate on his forms, that he purposefully left his age off. You're also going to hear from Reese that he doesn't want any of this money. In fact, he didn't ask for this suit to be brought. What you're going to see from Reese Lansing is that his age is just a number, and that number does not tell the full story, doesn't paint the full picture. More importantly, you're going to hear about a life care plan created by Dr. Skinner. And the plaintiff's counsel wants you to only consider the numbers that are in that life care plan created by Dr. Skinner. Dr. Skinner's life care plan is also incomplete. You're going to hear that the values for the treatments in that life care plan, the durations, the costs, aren't the full picture. Dr. Skinner's life care plan operates under the assumption that Reese will become symptomatic of PKD, polycystic kidney disease. But you're also going to hear that conclusion is based on 3 separate tests done at 3 different times in Reese's life, not considering his most recent tests, and that one of those tests was done when he was about to undertake one of the most stressful times in anyone's life, a 13-year-old boy beginning college. Now, you're also going to hear from another expert in the life care planning area, Dr. Sabbath. And you're going to learn from him that in order to fully understand what Reese will need if he ever becomes symptomatic, that you're going to have to consider more than just what's in the plaintiff's life care plan. There are several factors, several important variables that aren't considered in that plan. For example, not included in the plan by the plaintiff are things like that if Reese ever does become symptomatic, that he'll be able to continue to work based on his specialized knowledge and his intellect, and he probably wouldn't have any lost wages. Also, the probability that because Reese is already an organ donor, that he'd be able to get a transplant faster than others who haven't been organ donors. But most importantly, not considered in the life care plan, is the probability that Reese will ever become ill at all. You'll hear from Dr. Sabbath that there is no concrete information, facts, not even a suggestion that Reese will get this disease. As I've mentioned, the plan that's already created is based on sporadic testing data done at 3 different times in his life, not even considering his most recent tests. And those most recent tests show that Reese is a healthy individual. The physiologic markers that indicate PKD is becoming a problem in someone's life are not evident. They're not prevalent. They're not there in Reese's life. His most recent results show that he is a healthy young man. You're also going to see Reese and see that he shows no signs of this disease, none whatsoever. And finally, you're going to learn that the only individual to ever suffer or to ever die from this disease is Reese's mother, his biological mother, a woman whose life was very hard. She lived a hard life. She went at it as hard as anybody could. She had a life that was full of late nights, lots of alcohol, lots of cigarettes. And I'm sure that all of you know that none of those 3 things make for a healthy individual or a long life. Members of the jury, what my co-counsel and I ask of you today is to award no actual or punitive damages to Reese's parents. And as we proceed, I want you to remember 3 things that we've talked about. First, I want you to remember what Dr. Sabbath is going to tell you, is that Reese won't miss work, he won't suffer, and he won't need any future medical care. There's no certainty that he will suffer from PKD. And then I want you to remember the standard for actual damages, only those reasonably likely to occur. That means is you must be confident in both the treatment and the dollar figure each treatment. Only those reasonably likely to occur. And finally, I want you to remember what you're going to hear about the hospital, how they acted. You must believe that their conduct was so wrongful that relying on the patient's information that they were given, the good faith belief that they would not lie to a healthcare provider, was so wrongful that it deserves to be punished in dollars and cents. Members of the jury, what we ask of you today is to not just look at the numbers. There's more to the story than just a dollar figure or a value. Reese's age, the values in the patient's life care, or the plaintiff's life care plan are just numbers. And those numbers don't tell the full story. When you return your verdict today, we ask that you look at the entire picture. Thank you.